everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink monologue today. It's an emergency episode of the podcast, episode number 96, and Inter Miami has signed midfielder Telasco Segovia from Casa Pia in Portugal. He is Venezuelan, 21-year-old central midfielder, and I am very excited about this transfer. I woke up to the news and I started looking into him and I thought, wow, this is really impressive. I am really excited about this move and I couldn't wait to talk about it. And so I decided to just go live. I know Sor is normally a part of this. He's at work like a normal person would or should be, but I just couldn't wait. So I'm coming live and I want to hear from you guys and get your take on this. I want to get your impression because it feels like this could be a really exciting signing that has a huge impact on Inter Miami's, course over this season and potentially the next couple. And so I'm interested to hear your thoughts and I'll give you some of mine. I'm not sure exactly how long we'll go, but I just couldn't wait to talk about him. So let's get into it. He's Venezuelan. He's 21 years old. He came through at a club called Deportivo Lara. He debuted at 16 years old. So he was a kid that program clearly felt was going to be really special. He played 61 games over the course of a couple seasons for Deportivo Lara in Venezuela. He did play 4 Copa Libertadores games, 2 against Bolivar and 2 against Santos. So had some high-level competition. I know the Venezuelan league is not considered among the best in South America. So he does have some exposure on the continent, especially against Santos, a nice Brazilian club, at a really young age. He won the 2021 Venezuelan League Young Player of the Year. So he's a guy that has accolades, has impressed at every level, really, and has gone to be successful basically everywhere he's gone. And that includes his latest stop, but I'll get to that in a second. At age 19, he gets his move to Europe because even European scouts were starting to see this kid and think he had real potential. He gets a move to Sampdoria, age 19. He makes one appearance in the Serie A for Sampdoria, but it was a loan with an option to buy. He plays mostly with the B team for the second half of that season. And then Sampdoria gets relegated, and so they no longer are in a position to activate the purchase option. So he has to go back to Venezuela. But at the same time this is happening, his club in Venezuela, Deportivo Lara, is falling apart financially, so much so that they were unable to put together a team and play a season for the last couple of years. 2023, 2024, they did not play. So clearly financial mismanagement. And of course, the Venezuelan economy is probably not helping. So he becomes a free agent. And after impressing scouts with Lada and then going into Italy and also impressing scouts, he gets the move that most young players would love to get, signs into a Portuguese club as a free agent because, again, his club is financially not viable at the moment. Although I read that they're supposed to return to play in 2025. So we'll see if that happens. So he goes to Casa Pia, which is in the Portuguese First Division. He signs as a 20-year-old, plays some last year, gets about 800 minutes, 750 minutes, something like that. But this season, he's really broken out, played about 1,000 minutes in the first half of the season, and of late has become something of a locked-in starter for them. They really can't take him off the field, and especially in big games, including his second to last game with the club, December 29th. So just 2 weeks ago, they played Braga, which is a frequent competitor in the European competitions. And he scored in a win over Braga. So coming off of a really high moment and has played some really good competition there, Porto, Benfica. I think he didn't play against Sporting, but yeah, he's had an opportunity to play against really, really impressive competition. He's also appeared for the Venezuelan national team and has sort of become a locked-in starter for them over the last couple international windows as CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying goes on. He has made 8 appearances now for the national team, including against some really, really impressive competition, Brazil, Uruguay. He scored and played really well against Brazil, I believe, in the October international window, and drew some really rave reviews. He was also a big part of their youth setup, and was considered one of the prime prospects coming out of Venezuela over the last couple of years. I mean, he's 21, so he's one of these bright stars of this generation. He won the player of the tournament at the Maurice Ravello competition a couple of years ago, which is a really famous youth tournament. Back in 2022, he won the player of the tournament. So again, this is a guy that has always impressed, always stood out, and has not just stood out in if you really scout him, but has won accolades, player of the tournament, player of the year type awards. So really, really impressive. I did look specifically for if he had played against Javier Mascherano for Venezuela against Argentina, and I did find it February 5th, 2024 at the pre-Olympic tournament, the Olympic qualifying tournament last year that Diego Gomez was phenomenal at. Segovia did play for Venezuela against Argentina in the second round of that tournament, and it was a 2-2 draw. He started and he played well, apparently. So that's the connection to Javier Mascherano. It's a guy that that he knows, he's scouted, he clearly has played against and clearly likes. And Inter Miami had an opportunity to go get a really nice player. And I'll be honest, everything I've seen since I started looking into him this morning is really, really impressive. I really, really like this signing. He is a number 8, fills in the Diego Gomez role. Not quite the same type of player as Gomez, and I'll talk about that. But nonetheless, I think this is a really good signing. I do want to get to you guys, though, again, because I think you guys I want to hear what you guys have to say. Vaishnav says, is there a transfer fee cap in the MLS? I'll talk about this a little bit more, but basically your transfer fee gets amortized, which means it gets split up by the years of your contract with your salary, and that is the amount that you hit against the cap. And so if you have a huge transfer fee and it is so high that you can't fit within the roster rules, you have to be a DP. And so that's the salary combined with the transfer fee. So a player like Messi or Busquets both came as free agents. It's only their salary, but a guy like Lorenzo Insigne for Toronto, actually, he may have come as a free agent too. But again, if you buy a transfer fee, Cucho Hernandez, for example, had a $9 million transfer fee. So it's his salary combined with the transfer fee amortized. That indicates how much. So in theory, you can spend anything on a transfer fee, but the higher you go, the more likely it has to be a DP. Anton says, is this a U22 signing? Not necessarily, but it could be. $2.5 million is the number reported by Fabrizio Romano. It's a lot for a young player, but doesn't necessarily have to be a U22 player. And I'll get to that more in a few minutes. But yeah, not necessarily, but it could be. This is the same figure that Diego Gomez was on, just FYI, and he was a U22 for most of his time in Inter Miami, but at the very end, they moved him off of U22 status. So it's flexibility, I think. With Farias and Gomez going out, they had room, definitely. But again, they could not make him a U22 and bring in another U22. Skrilla says, I like this signing. Yes, he is the next Diego Gomez. Telasco Segovia is a real box-to-box player, and he is so talented. The Real Akeno says, how are his stats? I'm going to break him down a little bit, but he is a box-to-box midfielder, has a couple goals in his game, but he's not really a goal producer in that sense. He's a guy that's going to run midfields, and I think he's going to be really impressive. Hash says, it's an amazing signing. Thomas says he's got a lot of potential. Thomas says he will be a U22, and they're going to trade Farias for Baltasar Rodriguez. We will see. Wish we could get Victor Gyökeres. Would love to see his Spain celebration in pink. Yeah, maybe in about 7 years when he's past 30. all the young talents want to come into Miami. They want to be the next Diego Gomez. So this is something we've talked about a lot over the last year is Diego Gomez's success and his move to a Premier League club proves that Inter Miami can do that for you. And that is incredible. And it's going to help motivate young players to come, not just to play with Messi, but to also see that they have a path to not just what they want to do, but not just to play with Messi, but to also achieve their goals and dreams and go on to the next level. And I think this is what Segovia is going to be looking to do. So thank you for that, Jay. Anton says, yeah, the floor of the Venezuelan economy disappeared. Justin says that's why Farias will get traded for the U22 spot. Again, not necessarily. Russell says Segovia will not be a U22. He's too cheap. Okay, so who is this guy as a player? I was watching him this morning. Again, I've never seen him play a 90-minute game. So take all of this with a grain of salt. I was reading some scouting reports, looking at the numbers, watching some highlights, and coming up with an opinion. But I guess the big thing is he the Diego Gomez replacement? And I think stylistically, not necessarily, but as a player on the field and filling that box-to-box spot, I think he is exactly the Diego Gomez replacement. And more specifically, the Diego Gomez from early 2024, not late 2024, when he was playing more as a left winger. He's very technical. You can see that in him right away. And he has some flair, which I like a lot. I think he's going to have those little moments where, he just kicks it with the back heel between the legs type things that really are going to impress you as a fan, someone that's going to make you go, ooh, aha, twice a game. You see that a lot in his film. He's also very good on the ball, hard to get off the ball, which is not something you always see from an MLS midfielder. But he's very technical, very hard to strip of the ball, very ball secure. And so when you think of Sergio Busquets, it's impossible to take the ball off of him. Not that Segovia is quite at that level, but he's that type of player that you're going to feel very confident with him on the ball, deep in your own possession, and not worry about him turning the ball over. He's not Diego Gomez from a physical profile. Gomez was 6'2", 175, 180 pounds, physical monster. The type of player that can just go into the Premier League and stand up right away. Segovia is not that type of player. He's like 5'9", 5'10", much skinnier. He does seem to play more physically than his physical profile would indicate, but he's not a physical monster. He doesn't have those long strides that can cover ground like Diego Gomez does. He doesn't have that real long distance pace that Diego Gomez had, but he is quick. He is physical for his size. And so it's just really a lot to like. He has, again, reading some of the scouting reports, he is a really nice passer, and potentially that's his most. That's the thing about his game that stands out the most to the scouts. Can really put together some nice long distance passing, can really sit back and find the runners. And that is something that Inter Miami over the last year and a half under Tata Martino took advantage of a lot with guys like David Martinez and Sergio Busquets putting balls over the top to Jordi Alba or Diego Gomez or Lionel Messi or Leo Campana, etc. And he's really good also at dictating tempo. He has sort of the natural tools, so I've been told. And again, I just want to repeat, take all of this with a grain of salt because I've never watched him play a 90-minute game. This is all secondhand information. But he is apparently very good at dictating tempo, understanding when to speed things up, understanding when to slow things down, sort of wise beyond his years in that regard. And that is something you got to love from a young player because it's the intelligence, the understanding, the flow of the game. It's something you really want in the midfield. It's something not a lot of young MLS midfielders really possess, and something they need to grow into. And in a situation like what Inter Miami's in, when you're going to play a lot of different styles, some teams are going to sit really deep against you. Some teams are going to come out and play you. It's really important to have a midfielder that can sort of adjust, understand the game tempo, game flow, and when to push, when to go hard. At Casa Pia, he has been playing in a 3-4-3. Inter Miami did that a little bit this past season. And when we had Federico Redondo and Yannick Bright doing it, it looked really good at times, but you could tell that when it was any other midfielder in there, it was very difficult for them to keep up, because that two midfield setup in a 3-4-3 can be very difficult. It's very taxing. You have a lot of responsibility, especially defensively. And so it really takes a smart midfielder, it really takes a athletic midfielder that can do a lot of things, very versatile midfielder to play well. And that's what Segovia has been doing over the past couple, 2 seasons, year and a half at Casa Pia. And so the fact that he's come in, learned it, and in year 2 really started to thrive in that system, I think that really fills me with a lot of hope and expectation that he's going to be a stud, because, again, he's been through a lot of experiences, and he's been asked to do a lot, hold a lot of responsibility, and he stood up and had success in basically every level. And so, again, very impressive. I'm very impressed with him. He doesn't have, again, I mentioned it, he doesn't have the physical profile of a Diego Gomez, but he's a very hard worker defensively. If you look at some of the advanced analytics, gets into a lot of duels, wins a lot of duels, is ready for the physical defensive responsibility that I think Inter Miami needs from this type of player. Yeah, he's a really impressive passer, hard worker defensively. I saw someone who was doing a scouting report do a comp to Enzo Fernandez style. Again, I haven't seen him play, so I don't want to put that out there, but I did see that. So if you're trying to imagine what his game might look like, that's the name from a big player type standpoint to look for. I also wanted to talk about him adjusting to the MLS, because Diego Gomez, when he first arrived, anyone that was following remembers, in 2023, he looked kind of like a chicken without his head, running around, lacked precision. You could see the tools, you could see the physicality, you could see the athleticism, you could see him with a little bit of trickery, but he was just going 100 miles per hour all the time, and it did cost him, especially in the final third. Missed a few passes, missed a few shots, couldn't put the ball on target where he needed it to be. 2024, he calmed down, he grew up into the level, and he played a lot better. But I attribute a lot of that to the fact that he was taking a step up in league. He had played for Libertad in Paraguay, and the Paraguay league is not as good as the MLS, and it's not the same as the MLS. And so he was taking a step up, especially playing with teammates like Lionel Messi and Busquets and all that. So to take that step up clearly took an adjustment period for Diego Gomez. It's why I've said recently that I think it's going to take him a few months to step up to the Premier League level from the MLS. Segovia is the opposite. He has played at Casa Pia, played in the Portuguese Primeira Liga, and has played at that very high level. He's also played in CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying against Uruguay and Brazil and Paraguay and Chile. And so he knows what that top level is like. He knows what that level above the MLS is like. And now he's going to come down to the MLS. And I think he has a chance to just hit the ground running. He's not going to be intimidated by the athleticism. He's not going to be intimidated by the responsibilities he's given. And he's not going to be intimidated by the talent or skill level around him. So I think that he has a real chance to hit the ground running in a way that even if you're coming from an Argentina, you might not have, because, a guy like Federico Redondo is who I'm referencing. The Portuguese league is really a high level. And when you're playing the Benficas and the Sportings and the Bragas, it's real soccer, playing against some of the best clubs in the world. Okay, John S. says 2.5 is not cheap in the cap space. Yeah, we'll talk about the financial implications of this in a few minutes, but you're right. Again, he may have to be a U22. We'll talk about it. But again, this is the type of player I think you want to spend your U22 slot on if this is who it ends up being. He's a guy that has experience at a higher level, is young, has a ton of potential, and I think he fits what you want in a midfielder. His play style, from what I've seen, can be described as elegance. Yeah, if you watch him, he's got some flair to him. It's fun to watch. It's really fun to watch. What's the cap space situation? Again, we'll talk about that. Those who are expecting Segovia to be like Gomez, don't hold your breath. Same box-to-box type, but more defensive-minded. Yeah, like I said, I think in the first half of the season, we saw Gomez be much more of a box-to-box. But in the second half, he was playing far higher up. I will say for Venezuela, he plays more as like a 10, second striker type player. So he has that in his game. He's not necessarily a deep lying playmaker at all levels. He has played, and at youth level, he played higher up too. So there is some attacking prowess in his game. I see him make a few of those late runs, can get a goal. I think he's going to be good for, 5 or 6 goals a season, just making those late runs into the box. And so I think there's a little bit of offensive prowess, but I agree with you. He's going to play deeper. He's going to sit back. He's going to make really dynamic passes, work hard defensively, and hopefully just be a menace in the midfield. Tommy says he will be a U22. We'll see. U22 signings don't have the transfer fee included, so I assume he's U22. Again, we'll talk about it. Pure Vibes Only says, we got to trust the Raul Sanllehí now. I was thinking most of the new players will be Argentine, but I realize they have eyes around for good players. Yeah, I want to talk about Sanllehí and Mascherano as well. TRA says, so how many international roster slots do we have if we use them? 9 overall. I think it's 9 or 10. I will say Inter Miami has a ton of international roster slots to go get from other teams. That generally just costs allocation money, so it's not that hard to get, but you have to make sure you can fit it all within the budget. Francisco says, January 23rd, all the best U20 South American players are going to be playing. I imagine that IMCF will have scouts observing the tournament. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Okay, so what does this mean for Inter Miami financially? Diego Gomez was bought for $2.5 million from Libertad, and he was a U22 signing. He made about $500,000 as his salary, and so to amortize that with everything, it just forced them to make him a U22 DP in 2023 at the time. But you have to remember back in 2023, we were under sanctions and Inter Miami was trying to build this roster on the fly. We had a lot of players making more money than they were worth, I think. Guys like, it's not coming to me right now, I apologize. But Gregory and Jean Mota and Coco Jean and Nico Stefanelli, all these guys were players on the roster taking up real amounts of salary cap that maybe didn't fit the new direction Inter Miami was going with Lionel Messi and all that. So they had to make Diego Gomez a U22. But $2.5 million transfer fees, $3 million transfer fees, those get done in the MLS frequently by other teams. It hasn't happened for Inter Miami recently, although it did happen for Leo Campana. He was a DP for a while, but was eventually taken off DP status, even though he had about a $3.5 million transfer fee. And so if Segovia has, let's say, a 4-year contract with a $500,000 salary, which is what the other U22s have gotten recently, Diego Gomez, Facundo Farias, and Toto Aviles, that would mean you're talking about $1.25 million a year in cap charge. And you can buy that down with GAM, $500,000, $600,000 in GAM to buy that under the DB threshold. So it is not necessary for Telasco Segovia to be a U22, but it may work out that way based on how much they spend elsewhere. I think Inter Miami really wants to play, really wants to keep their options open for the summer to add a third DP. We saw some Neymar rumors recently. I think that that's something they're going to try and do. And so whether they go for a 2DP for U22 with the GAM in the first half of the season or not, I think it remains to be seen. But I think they want to keep the possibility of going 3-3 for the summer open. And so I think that's how they're going to structure the roster. So you may see a player like Segovia be a U22 under the definition for the first half of the season and be moved into not that status at the end of the season. I guess my point is I don't think he's going to be U22, and he certainly doesn't have to be a U22 like a guy like Federico Redondo or Toto Avias, they have to be because their transfer fees were $7.5, $8.5 million, $9 million. So those types of transfer fees, you sort of have to be a U22 or a full DP. So Inter Miami, they got a lot of allocation money. They got $3 million from the Diego Gomez transfer. They got $2 million from trading Leo Campana. So they have plenty of allocation money to work with. And that's before you get into the DPs and the U22 DPs. So I think that they have a lot of room to keep adding players. And I've said this plenty of times over the last couple of weeks on the podcast. I think they have 7, 8, 9 potentially new players to bring in. And since then, they've signed Fafa Picault. They've signed, or they're on the verge of signing Tadeo Allende. They're on the verge of signing Gonzalo Lujan. They're on the verge of now bringing in Telasco Segovia. And so they are adding pieces to the roster. I hope these guys are all available in 8 days for that game against Club America in Las Vegas, because I would love to get eyes on these guys and see what they have. And also, we just need bodies for that game. So I'm really, really excited about what they're doing and how this is all coming together. Mike V says, less like Enzo, more like Caicedo, but not as physical. Maybe. And again, we'll see. I am really excited to see what he looks like. This is a player that's really interesting. He says, I would argue that the Paraguayan league is the same as MLS, but very physical and close football, not open gameplay like MLS. Okay. Anton says, what does Javier Mascherano like to play, a 3-4-3 or a 4-3-3 or something else? Boosie, Bright, Segovia, Grim. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I think we're looking at a back four with 3 mid. I think we're looking at a 4-3-3 is what I would guess we're going to see from Javier Mascherano. Do you think the next target for Miami is the goalkeeper from Tigres? I think the next target is Baltasar Rodriguez. And I think that's something that could happen in the next couple of days. But we'll talk about that tomorrow, I think. Tommy says he's taking Farias's place. Maybe. John S. says, I prefer him to be a U22 to buy a defender. Yeah, well, I still think there's room for a defender, honestly. Preseason matches schedule has been released. Yeah, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Neymar is not coming. Santos is the only option. Tommy says no to Neymar. John S. and Hash, thanks for the comments. Yeah, the Neymar thing is a whole other thing. And again, we'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay, so what does Inter Miami's midfield look like? I want to start by saying Segovia has really stepped forward and become sort of a locked-in starter recently for Casapia. He's played about 1,000 minutes already this season. So I think Inter Miami has to be a little careful with him. Don't put him under 2,500, 2,800 minutes this season in for the MLS before he gets his next real break. And also kind of ease him in the preseason. I don't think he needs a huge introduction in the preseason. So I think you're going to get 80% of Segovia this year in terms of playing minutes and what we'll see from him next year. But you still have Sergio Busquets at the top of the room. I think Segovia and Federico Redondo and Yannick Bright are 4 guys that Javier Mascherano is going to love. I think Benjamin Kramaski, you put him right in there and you have 5 guys, 5 midfielders that can be versatile players. You can put multiple of them in specific positions and you can surround them with each other pretty effectively. And I think you feel great about that. You also have David Ruiz still on the roster. And Julian Gressel still on the roster as a guy who can play as a number 10. Baltasar Rodriguez, I think he's also a guy that can be sort of a midfielder. So there's a lot of midfield options. I love that. I think the midfield is so important. So I want to be playing guys that are playing well and playing effectively. We're going to play a lot of games. We've gone over the schedule, but if Inter Miami does what they're aiming to do in terms of going deep in competitions, they're going to be playing a lot of 2-game weeks. And so you really want to be deep and talented, especially in the midfield, because as we saw last year, I think if you don't get the midfield right, you can really cost yourself games. I will say, I said at the beginning of the season, the beginning of the offseason, that I could see them adding another box-to-box and a DM. I wanted to see them bring in someone that could be sort of a backup defensive midfielder, sort of reserve option behind Yannick Bright or potentially compete with Yannick Bright. I've always mentioned Dixon Arroyo as a guy in terms of salary fit, positional fit, profile. Like I would have loved to add a guy like that, but I think Segovia can do that. And so I think you solve both the box-to-box Diego Gomez replacement and sort of another defensive midfield option, so you're never caught out without one, with one signing. And I love that. Again, it's some versatility. We talked about Javier Mascherano potentially looking for versatility in his style of play and in how he lines up. And I know Sor hated that, but he can be an old man sometimes. And so I think Mascherano really is looking forward to that. And I still think there's room to move one out. And I'm specifically thinking about Julian Gressel. So I think if you go into the season with Busquets, Yannick Bright, Federico Redondo, Telasco Segovia, Benjamin Kramaski, David Ruiz, I think you feel really good about that midfield option. And then if you throw in Julian Gressel, that's great too. So I really like what they've done with the midfield. I really like this signing. I still think they have work to do defensively. I still think they have work to do with a potential striker option. And then the goalkeeping situation is completely up in the air, but they certainly need to sign a goalkeeper or two, even if it's to be the backup to Drake Callender. So there's still a lot of work to do, but I really like how this is coming together. I really like how the midfield's coming together. I think it's very talented, very deep, a lot of guys that you like, a lot of guys that you feel comfortable playing in MLS games, right? I understand you go into the Club World Cup and maybe you specifically don't feel like David Ruiz is ready for that level. But I think when you talk about Sergio Busquets, you're going to feel great about it. I think when you're talking about Telasco Segovia, who's played against Porto, played against Benfica, played against the Brazil national team, like he has these big time games, played in the Copa Libertadores. He is going to be ready for that level, I think. So you're talking about basically for every game in this season, you now feel pretty comfortable with what you can put in the midfield. And I love that. I really, really love that. Tony says you can't switch between the 3 DP and U2 DP models once the season starts. Okay, maybe I believe you. That was a new rule implemented last summer, and so teams were declaring during the summer, but potentially that is something you have to declare at the start. I know that the allocation money that comes with that is would affect your plans for the season, so I guess that makes sense. Mascherano said they were looking for defenders that they need the GAM, so he will be a U22. Again, if they sign Gonzalo Lujan, they're going to have money to sign another center back because they are losing $1 million salary from Federico Redondo. I'm sorry. And I'm mixing up my names. There's too many F-named players on our team right now. Nico Frede, coming off, he was on $1 million salary, and Sergei Christoph was on $750,000 salary, $800,000 salary. So you have a lot of money coming off the books for defenders to go bring in new defenders. And so I think that I still think they have room. And again, you have more allocation money this year than you did last year. So I think they're in a good spot. Mike V says Campana scoring 25 this year, Suarez 15 tops. I think Suarez is going to score 25, but I think Campana is ready for a 20-goal season. I think he's really impressive. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in New England. Mike V says the next Carranza, maybe. The GOAT says Farias is gone for the spot. We'll talk about Farias tomorrow, but I think that's really interesting. Sergio says it seems like Segovia and Baltasar play similar roles. I don't think so. I think Baltasar Rodriguez is like a 10, can play a little bit on the wings. Maybe can play as a box-to-box, but he's much more of a Matias Rojas type attacking-minded player where I think Segovia is going to be much more comfortable sitting deep. Skrilla says a 4-2-3-1. Yeah, and says, listen, sometimes a 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1 can kind of look the same when and you just kind of mix and match how it looks based on what midfield profiles you put in there. But it is what it is. And Mike V says, the way they're building, they're going to play 2-7-1. Yeah, they need defenders. They definitely need defenders. They definitely need attackers, specifically strikers. And versatility has seemed like a big theme for Javier Mascherano so far this offseason and the 4 guys they've signed. But we'll see how that actually plays out, because I would still like to see a true striker, a guy who can come in and be not Campana, but a Campana replacement. And I think they need a big center back. I really do. And I think the goalkeeping situation is weird. So I think there's a lot of room to add players. Yeah. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about was Javier Mascherano and Raul Sanllehí. I was very I don't know if critical is the right word, but I was very unconfident. I lacked confidence in them. They had never been in MLS. I had never seen them work. They had never built a roster in MLS. This is a new level for them. Javier Mascherano has never worked at a club as a manager. And Raul Sanllehí is coming from, Arsenal and Barcelona. I know he had a stop in Liga 2 with Zaragoza, but the MLS is just a different league. And I was curious to know if they could build the type of roster that they would need to be successful here. And so far, I'm impressed. They have identified guys. They have gone after them. They have not taken 2 weeks to get each signing through the door. They have come one after the other. And I still think they have a couple guys to go, but I like the progress they're making. If they can get the Baltasar Rodriguez deal over the line, you're talking about 5 signings in the first 2 weeks of 2025, and that is really, really impressive. I guess Fafa Pico was late December, but you're talking about 5 guys in about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and that is really impressive business. And I think the goalkeeping situation is weird, and I still think they need to target a big-time center back. But I think if you get the goalkeeping situation solved next, and you get the big center back before the season starts on February 18th, I think you feel really good, man. I think you feel really good, and there's a couple other spots you might want to fill in. I think, again, I would love to get another DM, but that might not be necessary anymore after this signing. The goalkeeper, the backup goalkeeper, rather, the backup striker. But those type of signings, I think, can come into late February, early March, and you'll be okay. But getting the base, your starting 11 for the CONCACAF Champions Cup, those types of signings, I want to get in as early as possible. And then I also want to give them credit for getting these guys in before the preseason starts. That was something that Tata Martino and Chris Henderson didn't do last year. And the circumstances were much different. They had a lot of exits to deal with before they could bring guys in. And so that was a contributing factor. But Inter Miami was bringing guys in after the season started, right? Chelo Wiegand came in long after the season started. Yannick Bright and Leo Alfonso had to earn their scholarships, their contracts late into the season. Matthias Rojas was late into the season. And so when you start the season with DeAndre Yedlin, and then you lose that and you don't have a right back, that is a tough situation that affected Inter Miami early on last season. And so getting the groundwork done early on in the season is really, really nice. And especially if you can do it before the preseason even starts, so that by the time you get to that first game, February 18th, everyone is really ready to rock and roll. I really, really love that. Yeah. And then the last thing is, listen, this signing I really like. I really like this signing. I really like the Fafa Pico signing. I don't know that much about Tadeo Allende. I don't know much about Gonzalo Lujan. But my point is, the point I want to make is these guys identified these players. And by these guys, I mean Mascherano and Sanllehí. They identified these players and they went out and got them. It is yet to be seen if they have a great eye for talent that can deliver in MLS. Like, we haven't seen that yet. So I still think there's a little bit of a question mark, but the fact that they have a plan and they're executing on it makes me really, really confident. I like that a lot. Thomas says Baltazar is a DM. Okay, that's interesting, and we're going to talk about him more tomorrow, so I'll hold off on that, but I really like that. Francisco says Bright will be the replacement defensive midfielder. He will surely begin with Busquets and Redondo. Bright will have to fight for that position. Sure, and I think you got to love that. I will say last season I thought Bright played much better than Redondo, but if you go with Busquets, a combination of Busquets and Bright, or Busquets and Redondo, or Busquets and Telasco Segovia, I think you love all three of those combinations really, really well. He says Mascherano will surely play 2 defensive midfielders. And then, again, if you're getting into that situation, like, you can play those guys, rotate them consistently, play Bright and Redondo. They have plenty of experience playing together from last year. Busquets will partner well with anyone, really, as long as they have the athleticism. You add in a talented player like Telasco Segovia, and I think you just feel really good about that. PVO says Gressel will possibly leave because I don't know where he fits. They're trying to make up for the lack of pace this team suffers. Even Redondo under Mascherano in the national team wasn't a starter. True. And listen, well, the pool for Argentina is really impressive. So the fact that Redondo wasn't a starter on the U23 level when he was 21 is maybe not that surprising, but or not an indictment on him. Julian Gressel is the big question mark because he's on a big salary, and this is what happened last year to Inter Miami. They had a lot of guys on big salaries that there was interest in, not even huge salaries. Chris McVeigh comes to mind. John Mota comes to mind. Gregory comes to mind. They were guys on the roster that were difficult to move off, not because there wasn't interest, but because teams were trying to extract as much as they could from Inter Miami and not give Inter Miami any sort of sweetheart deal, because now Inter Miami is sort of the it club in this part of the world, I guess. And it was very difficult to move those guys early on in the offseason because the other teams weren't in any rush. That might be the problem with Julian Gressel. He's on a little bit of a big contract. He's a good player in MLS, and I think there will be interest for him. And I think by the time the season starts, there will be teams that are looking at what they did this offseason and say, I think we could really use Julian Gressel. But on January 10th, they may say, let's see what we can do first. And if we have to go back to Julian Gressel, he'll be there. So I think Julian Gressel might be on this roster for a while. I think he might even be on the roster for the season. I don't want to take that away from him. But if he moves, I think that frees up Inter Miami from a positional fit perspective, because I don't know how well he fits. Obviously, the Tata Martino connection was really big with Julian Gressel, so that's gone. And I think he can go somewhere and be a starter, impactful player. And he got to be a part of the Supporters' Shield winning team. He got to be a part of this Lionel Messi team. He may want to go out and be a star player again. Celine says, don't they still need a backup striker? I think so. How are we making signings? MLS transfer window opens on January 29th, right? No, the MLS transfer window, you can sign people. Teams have been signing players since November, since the season ended. Mike V says Tata, our worst coach in history. I don't know about that. Miami looking at two defenders, Nahuel Ferraresi and Maximiliano Falcon. I think they need another. I think they're going to sign like a top of the room center back that can start alongside Toto Aviles and have David Martinez and the new signing and Aviles and potentially Gonzalo Lujan all fighting for spots. And now you have four guys competing for two spots. I think that's really good. And I think this player is going to be a prime age, 25, 26, 27 type signing. We heard Paulo Diaz from River Plate. I think that would be a great signing. You mentioned some in the chat, Skrilla. So any one of those, if they really believe in the guy, is going to be a great signing, I think. But I definitely think that's sort of next. This Baltazar Rodriguez, Facundo Farias thing is important because you got to know if Facundo Farias is going to take up a U22 spot or not. So if you move him off the roster, that frees up some of your game planning for the rest of the offseason. But beyond that, I think you got to figure out the goal-keeping situation. I think you got to figure out the number one center back situation is sort of at the top of the list. And I think that's what they're going to do next. I think that's where we're going to hear a lot of the rumors over the next couple of weeks. I think there's room for a backup striker, maybe another. I actually think they're doing a really good job. They got two goalkeepers, maybe. They got to get some international spots from other teams, but they have the allocation money to do that. So I think the offseason is going really well. I think if you're an Inter Miami fan, you should feel a lot better about where Inter Miami is now than they were 2 weeks ago. You filled in some depth, right? 2 weeks ago, we had thought they moved on a lot of their quality backup options, and Diego Gomez and Campana and Matias Rojas, like some surprises even. Now they're filling in the roster with quality players that are going to have an impact, and I think you got to love that. So that's it for today, guys. I will say, well, a couple other questions. Is there a chance MLS could increase the salary cap before the season starts, or it's too late? The salary cap grows every year by design. You can look up what those numbers are, but the salary cap increases every season. The next collective bargaining agreement, I believe, is in 2028. And you have to have these things agreed between the players union and the MLS. So it's not as easy as the MLS just deciding to do it. But it does increase every season. So they do have a little bit more room. I think this signing is to get someone with experience against Porto to give insight of the whole team for the Club World Cup. Yeah, but I also think he's a really good player. like, I think that's an added bonus. And as I mentioned, when you go into the Club World Cup, you feel confident with Busquets. You feel confident about Segovia. Two midfielders that have played against these types of teams before. I think you're going to feel good about that. And then Hash says wins the next live stream. We're going to go live tomorrow. I think we're going to go live at noon Eastern. We've been trying to do 2 episodes a week throughout the off season, but I had some personal business to take care of last night. So Sora and I couldn't go live. So we decided to go live Saturday at noon instead. And so we'll talk more about Segovia. We'll talk about the Facundo Farias, Baltasar Rodriguez stuff. We'll talk about Neymar. We'll talk about the preseason. We'll talk about a lot of things that are going on. But I just really wanted to react to this Telasco Segovia news because it is super exciting. I think this is probably the best player we are signing so far this offseason. I love Fafa Picault as a player, and I'm excited to see what Lujan and Tadeo Allende bring. But this player, I think, is really special, and I'm really excited to see what he's got. So that's it for now, guys. I appreciate it. Do me a favor, hit the like, subscribe, all that stuff. And if you're listening to this on podcast, rate it 5 stars or not. But anyways, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this and have a wonderful day.